So you think that these questions that Ben Zoma is asking, they're standard conventional wisdom that you don't need the Torah, and certainly not Mishnah, and certainly not Pirkei Avot. Who is wise? Well, someone who has a lot of knowledge. Very simple. This person is wise. Or maybe parenthetically, how the American aphorism goes, being smart is to know that a tomato is a fruit. Being wise is to know not to put the tomato in a fruit salad. But again, that's conventional wisdom. Why do we need the Torah to elucidate to us something that all humanity understands? Furthermore, who is rich or who is strong? Well, the world has no shortage of quote-unquote heroes, of how the world portrays heroes. As somebody who's been through life and was able to withstand that and able to remain strong, that's strength. Who is rich? Seemingly someone who has a lot of money. Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, people with a lot of money. And who is honored? Who's honorable? Well, obviously someone who the entire community or their inner circle or even the outer circle looks up to them and regards them with high honors. Why do we need the Mishnah to elucidate this? Prat, specifically when it comes to Pirkei Avot. Pirkei Avot is not just a standard Mishnah, but as we learned before, out of all the Mishnayot, which focus on our legal obligations within Judaism, Pirkei Avot is the only Mishnah that focuses on climbing beyond the letter of the law or the spirit of the law, but not the legality. Why do we need a Mishnah to elucidate something which conventional wisdom already teaches us through and through? First and foremost, the Rabbi begins by saying, why is it not we're going to take this stanza by stanza. Regarding the wise person, why is it enough to just for a person to keep the company of truly wise people, be around professors and scientists and whoever are the top in their field, in order to absorb as much as possible? You know, you start on the mailroom of a company, they tell you look up and see what worked and follow a certain formula, because it's a proven formula. So, generally speaking, someone who's wise, someone who surrounds themselves with wise people and looks up to them and is willing to be a sponge to them in order to absorb everything that they have to teach them. Also, when it comes to the second stanza, being rich, as we sort of touched upon in the last class, this question and the answer seemingly don't match. Ben Zoma begins by asking who is rich. Okay. And what does he go to answer? Someone who's happy with their portion. Well, again, the Mishnah, as we said before, is very concise and precise with his wording. It begins by asking who is rich, but then turns to happiness. Someone who's happy with their portion. The Mishnah here is not trying to elucidate who's happy. Because if I have $100 and I'm happy, does that make me rich? No, it makes me happy with $100. And when the creditors are calling and you have to pay this bill and this bill, and you're happy with the little that you have, does that make you rich? Practically, I'm talking about practical. Over here, we have to look at the practical aspect of it. The halacha is someone who betroths a woman on condition. When if a person is poor and says, I betroth you on condition that I'm rich, is this marriage affected? Is it executed? In other words, he has a single dollar to his name, and he says, I betroth you on condition that I'm very rich right now. Not that I'm going to be rich. Right now I'm rich. Why? According to his mission, because I'm happy with what I have. Is a marriage executed? No, it's not executed. Unlike, and we're going to learn this before Elul, before Tishrei, someone who is completely wicked on every single account of being wicked according to Torah, betroths a woman on condition that I'm completely righteous. Well, that marriage is executed immediately, and that we're going to speak about before Elul. But someone who is very poor financially and betroths a woman based on the fact that I'm rich, it's not executed. But wait a second, he could say, I'm happy with the little I have. He could be a hippie. He could be woke. He could be one of those, whatever it is. Like, I'm fine with it. That's not rich. So the question and the answer seemingly don't match. If the Mishnah was focusing on who's happy, okay, I get it. Be content with what you have gratitude for what you have, and Baruch Hashem, you'll be happy. But that's not rich. The Mishnah here is speaking very, very concisely, very precisely. And the last question is, who is honorable? And again, the Mishnah answers, Ben Zoma answers, someone who honors all creations. HaMechabed et habriyot. It comes a question. In contrast to what the standard conventional understanding of being honorable, someone who everybody looks up to and gives honor and prestige and puts them on the pedestal, which is true on a conventional level. But here the answer is someone who honors all other creations. And what if the person honors creations and they don't honor him back? And they look down upon him with disdain? So, but wait a second. We're talking about qualifying 4 different archetypes. The Mishnah begins, who's honorable? And then says someone who honors creations. But it doesn't say, and is honored back. So if you give honor to all around you, and they spit in your face, they look down upon you, are you less honorable? On a conventional level, yeah, of course. Just like a person who doesn't have money in their account, don't say you're rich when you're not. You're pretending to be. So obviously here, as we learned before, when one learns Pirkei Avot and falsely comes to understand, this is so wise, this is so brilliant, wow, what beautiful prose, what beautiful flow of words, and then you didn't learn it at all. Because again, Pirkei Avot is not here to impart conventional wisdom. Even in contrast to what the other parts of the Torah, even mystical parts of Torah, that over here, Pirkei Avot is here to give us a view from above onto all of the human condition in order to forge a healthy and holy relationship between ourselves and God, and obviously ourselves and all those around us. And to everything, into all aspects of the world, including over here, wisdom, strength, wealth, and honor. The Maharal of Prague, incidentally, parenthetically, or maybe not so, but the Maharal of Prague, Yehuda, the famed sage Yehuda Leib of Prague, explained in his commentaries that these four qualities are not just incidental, but rather these four qualities are enumerated in the beginning of our Mishnah are the base traits that are absolutely necessary in order to be a vessel upon which the Shekhinah, God's divine holy presence, rests upon. In other words, where God manifests the Shekhinah as a feminine aspect of God, which represents the part of God which creates the world and is manifest within the world.
The four qualities: rich, happy, honorable. Those were the ones you said mentioned.
Yeah.
And the question about the honorable, when you said that even if they spit in a person's face, the one who's honorable, if they honor even those who spit in their face, even
We didn't get there yet. We're going to go there, piece by piece. First and foremost, the Rabbi directs us to understand that while conventional wisdom of the world defines these qualities with certain that are based on certain criteria, but Pirkei Avot over here is giving us a complete revision of these qualities, their essence, enough to make a human being, a yid, a vessel in which Hashem reveals Himself through them. And these four qualities are absolutely vital and necessary for this revelation. In other words, while the rest of the world saying, okay, having money is important, being honorable is important, having strength is, wisdom is all, yes, it's all important. But we're not talking about that. At which point does a person become a vessel and a funnel for God in this world?
God.
So these are the four qualities that are absolutely necessary for the Shekhinah to rest upon the Jew. And therefore, we're not talking about externalities. Rather, as we're going to be exploring, while the rest of the world defines these criterias, these conditions, hinging upon external criteria, objective criteria, here, what Pirkei Avot is going to revise and teach us is that all of these qualities are based on one's internal perception, which is giving to us over here by a perspective from God. In other words, none of these qualities, and especially in the way the Ben Zoma defined them, hinge upon anything that's happening on the outside. It's all internal. This is a definition of who you, not what you have, not what you've acquired, not what you've accomplished, but really who you. Because in order to be a vessel for God, there has to be a you. For you to be a vessel to God, there has to be a you. And not a meek you, your actual self. And these four qualities that we're going to see are the directional pointer to who you really are. Internally, notwithstanding any external conditioning, any external circumstance, lack or the haves. Doesn't matter. And this is where we're going to go with this. Rabbi says that Ben Zoma is teaching us these qualities based on what Shlomo HaMelech teaches, V'gam et ha'olam natan, that even the world Hashem placed into our hearts. In other words, each and every one of us has the entire world in our heart. But what does that mean, the entire world? That one's viewpoint of the world is subjective to one's viewpoint of oneself. Let that sink in. One's viewpoint of the world is subjective to one's viewpoint of oneself, from within oneself. In other words, every one of us perceive the world from the goggles that we have upon our eyes. From whatever lenses we're looking at the world, that's the way the world appears to us. Somebody who has sunglasses, the world is going to be very dark to them. Even though it could be like in the middle of the day, 12 o'clock, when the sun is out, still everything's dark and gloomy. If a person learns to take away those shades and see organically, they'll see a whole entire different world. It's very interesting. There are certain shades that allow a person to see certain spectrums or not see certain spectrums. And if this is the only way the person knows how to look the world, like in other words, he always had these glasses on, in his mind, these spectrums are there or not there, and that's it. Don't tell me I know what I see. I know what I experience on a day-to-day level.
That comes from within.
But then that's the whole question. If the viewpoint is literally from one's inner mind's eye, then even when it's not visible on the outside because of an external lens, one still knows the truth. But if one only has the external view from the lens perspective, then that's a whole entire different vision, sight.
That's not true.
That's the difference between having sight and vision. Vision stems from within oneself. Sight, from the outside out. How much you only capture what you can see.
That's the incrustation.
That's the external. Over here, we're going to be looking from within oneself.
Because it doesn't come from the godly soul, right? Because when you're not looking from the internal, it doesn't come from the godly soul, so it's not true to yourself.
It's not just not true to yourself. It might not even be truth at all.
Right.
At all. And a person could be living a whole entire different perspective. You know, there's an anecdote. In the time of communism, a Jewish kid was sent to school, public school, and over there it was literally the brainwashing of the arm of the communist government. And so the teacher stands and says, "Who knows what happened in 1799?" And little Moshe, who comes from a Chassidic family, says, "Oh, the Alter Rebbe was born. And the Alter Rebbe went out of jail." He says, "The Alter Rebbe? Who's the Alter Rebbe?" This is stupidity. Get this out of your head. Pushkin was born, the great writer. Alexander Pushkin. And then the answer, the next question, and who knows, the teacher asks, what happened in 1812 then? And the young Moshe says, obviously Alexander Pushkin had his bar mitzvah. In other words, it's the way you view reality is based on the way you view reality. And it's very subjective to the person. And if one is not aware of it, you might see or not see whole entire worlds. And be able to, if you have the vision that stems from in one's internal self, then you'll see everything, for the most part. If not, people could walk the entire life the Tehillim says, they have eyes but they don't see. And they have ears and they don't hear.
They have a heart, but they don't feel.
In other words, because everything is from the external. For example, so let's say they have a heart and they don't feel. Over here, what is like, even with that, before we move forward, why do people not feel? Well, their heart is supposed to be sensitive, but because they experienced trauma in their life, because they had hardships in their life, because the world sat upon their shoulders, whatever it is, as a defense mechanism from what was attacking from the outside, the inside had to become encrusted, so it won't feel like the heel of the foot becomes encrusted with dead skin in order to absorb the shock of the constant steps. It becomes tough. As we know that the Chassidic explains that the heel is so coarse that even if you dip it into boiling water, you will barely feel it. Versus putting a face in hot water, you'll feel it immediately. But now let's think about this. If one lives life based on what happened to them outside, they stop living. They just stop living. They stop feeling. They stop really living. They stop living. They're not looking to grow. They're looking to escape. And even their growth is an escape then.
If your mind goes towards your heart, then that would never happen, right?
It depends which mind. Because the animal soul also has a mind. Except the mind of the animal soul, the intellect of the animal soul is embedded within the emotions. Where it's like a child. A child has an intellect, but that intellect is embedded within the emotions. How do I get what I like candy? How do I get it? I don't like doing homework. How do I get out of it? But not if I need candy. That's not. You can't think independent of the emotion. The children are telling the parents what to do. It's not that the parents are governing the children. So in that sense, it depends on which mind. If it's the animal soul, in order to protect itself, will be able to come up with all kinds of the most. You ever seen a child who's, man, children sometimes are so wise and so smart when it comes to how do I get what I need and what I want. You know, lahavdil, when you look at the mob figures, the mafia in America, Lucky Luciano, lahavdil, Yid, Binyamin Halevi Siegel, Bugsy Siegel, Meyer Lansky, says if they were in corporate America, these people will be the greatest CEOs, the greatest tycoons, the greatest. To set up such a network, in such an organized, with people who are completely dysfunctional, and to take these people and put into order. I mean, you have to be a very good leader to do that, and an excellent, has visions, and international network, a chain of supply and demand, and this, our entire hierarchy. But then again, to use the mind for that kind of corruption, it's only to how do I get money, and how do I avoid going to jail? That's it. They did. They helped Israel. They did help Israel. But, again, imagine if they would have utilized their true selves for achieving truth in this world. Could you imagine then what could have done if they would have taken a network and transformed that to transform? Look, lahavdil, to differentiate infinite amount of time. Look at the Rabbi. One man revolution of global historic proportions, changing the entire world around him. A human being said, like when I remember watching during COVID, every single night I would watch a Rabbi video, and from time to time now if I'm not learning, I'm going to watch it, like I watch one of the videos. But when you watch it every single day, one thing that occurred to me is that there's a Rabbi sitting in Brooklyn, New York, 717 Crown Heights, not in the White House, not in a castle, it's 770. And not in a posh Beverly Hills, not in Great Neck, in Crown Heights with everything that Crown Heights have. And day in and day out, revolutionizes the world. And every single talk is how to draw God and how to revolutionize the world. One human being changes the entire world, literally, on every single level. Every single level. There hasn't been one sector of the world that hasn't been revolutionized by the Rebbe.
That's what his mother said, which is completely different.
And, for example, like the whole entire food stamps and the what's the name, the food stamps and the no, what's that? There's the SNAP. The Rabbi is the one that...
SNAP's a food stamp. No, it's not food stamp. No. SNAP is a government-based program that allows people to use a card in order to get food and groceries and Pampers and things like that. But that was initiated by the Rabbi.
And with the surplus, the Rebbe says there's surpluses, certain things. Why don't you? In other words, this was a black politician, a woman who was disgraced by her own party, who was literally passed over and relegated. Okay, you go to somewhere that nobody ever thought would matter anyway. So, see what one human is able to. Okay, so this is a Rebbe. It's not a normal human being. It's not an average human being, as they say. To put it infinitely mildly. But then again, the Rebbe empowered every single one of us to do this. Every one of us has that power. Now, the Rebbe is Rosh Bnei Israel, the head of the Jewish people. Just like the head tells the hand, you pick up this, and the foot you go over here, and the heart you pump over here, and the head tells every aspect. When a person jams their finger, it's not their finger that feels the pain. It's the head that feels the pain. Right? Everything's in the head. Everything begins in the way that the mind understands things. Therefore, the Rabbi is the one that is able to position each person what you need to do and how you need to do for your benefit and for the world's benefit. The Havdil to differentiate infinitely so. Look at the other CEOs and Bugsy Siegel, so they contributed. But could you imagine what would happen if they would take that kind of strength and and really charge the world to make it better? Everything begins with the way we view ourselves. While the world defines these four archetypes, wise, strong, rich, and honorable, as being external based on external conditioning, the Mishnah is now going to start teaching us. This is teaching us about ourselves and our viewpoint for the world. We know the famous Maisa with the Friedrich Rebbe the ones after the Friedrich Rebbe left Russia, after the arrest, the final arrest, the 11th arrest, the arrest of 1927, which we're about to, on Gimel Tammuz, was the day that the previous Rebbe came out of prison, but not out of prison. He was about to be executed. The KGB files that came out, clearly indicated that night he was supposed to be executed. And they had enough damaging evidence.
So that's right.
The previous. They had enough damaging evidence with no questions. There was no question. It was the public enemy number one. Because it wasn't just breaking the laws by encouraging parents to teach their children Judaism until Mesiras Nefesh and keep kosher and mikvah, but he kept them sending emissary after emissary after emissary to open up mikvot in defiance of the governments. And the rabbi who would run the mikvah for a day would be arrested, shot, or exiled to Siberia. A mikvah would be filled with concrete. The previous rabbi would send the next one, and then rabbi would know he's going to open up for maybe a night, 2 nights, a month, whatever, until he gets caught, and he'll eventually be arrested and shot. So there's no breaking the Chassidim. Mendel said in Russia we had by the Tmimim, we had a saying: to sit in in jail for a year, that's a biblical obligation. 2 years, now you're being strict with yourself. 3 years or more, now you're just showing off. And that was the way. It wasn't a nice aphorism. That was life, and there was not a question. There's no hesitancy. You went full force. And when Chassidim would be arrested, they would be asked often, "Where are your Farbrengens?" Because they knew that the Farbrengens are what's charging the Jewish people, these people to be. But public enemy number one was the Rebbe, the one that was pushing this in every talk, in every sikha, in every Farbrengen, and every letter, with sending shaliach over here after shaliach underground. So after the series of miracles that occurred in 1927, and that's next week's lesson about the previous Rabbi says that the one thing that allowed him to overcome this entire ordeal with the abuse and the torture that he wrote somewhat in his diaries. When the KGB files came out, he was tortured beyond anything you could imagine. But one thing that allowed the previous Rebbe to survive, and mind you, the previous Rebbe already had multiple sclerosis at that point, and he wasn't that physically healthy. It's a Rebbe, so he absorbs all the trauma for the generations. Like we said, the head absorbs everything first and foremost. So it wasn't that simple. And what he said, the one thing that allowed me to overcome this was the Baal Shem Tov's explanation of Hashgacha Pratit. And next week we're going to really focus why that, and why did the Rebbe need that altogether. But after the release, one of the conditions was that by Tishrei that year, the previous Rebbe would have to leave. He would have to leave Russia.
Condition of what? Letting him out?
Yeah.
Letting him live.
Letting him live, they changed on the 3rd of Tammuz, but they didn't tell anybody what happened. Only the Rebbe's close confidants knew that the previous Rebbe was released from prison, but he was sent to exile, to Kostroma. And he was supposed to be there for 10 years in hard labor. Then it was relegated. It's by all the way up next to Siberia. It's an exile. he was sent over there for 10 years, and then it was relegated to 3 years, and within 9 days you're free to go. It's a whole miracle.
That doesn't happen.
No, it doesn't. It was a whole miracle, and the previous Rebbe was very obstinate with them. When you read the diaries, if you want to know what true heroics, how to deal with strength, with real challenges of life, when your entire life is literally pushing against you. At the same time, you know it's all God. How do you not just survive? How do you live and create and remain vibrant? That diary is.
So they just sacrifice that one?
It's Likutei Diburim Chelek Daled, part 4 in the entry of the arrest and release, or Prince in Prison. Yeah, so there's other. It came out different. You could go on. I believe you could go on Sichos in English, and they have it in on free online. Anyway, so when he left Russia, 2 Chassidim came to him from Odessa, and asked and said, and each one walked in their friends. Each one walks into the Rebbe and asks and has a private audience. In the course of the private audience, the Rebbe says, "No, how is Odessa as far as Yiddishkeit? What's going on?" The first one says, "Oh Rebbe, Odessa is outstanding. There's shiurim Baruch Hashem, notwithstanding all the pressures, and there's minyanim, notwithstanding all the scrutiny, and there's Ahavat Yisrael, and there's Farbrengens, and we help each other." And the Rebbe was very happy and elated and gave 10 rubles to the Chassid. Afterwards, the guy comes out from Yechidus and tells his friends. His friend asks him, "No, what did the Rebbe tell you?" He says, "The Rebbe even gave me, asked me how was Odessa. I answered him how good it is, and he gave me 10 rubles." And he was very taken aback by this. It's like he said, in his mind, how do you like the Rebbe like that? The Rebbe's asking you a question. You got to tell him the truth. You don't say something just to placate the Rebbe. You got to tell him the truth. So he comes to the Rebbe. His turn to go into private audience begins, and he comes to the Rebbe and he says, "Rebbe, with all due respect to my friend, I got to tell you the real what's happening." Because the Rebbe asked him with Odessa as well. He says, "All due respect to what my friend tells you, there's the politics of Odessa is just completely just insane. Everybody's fighting. This one is in odds with this one, and it's hard to get a minyan, and so on and so forth." And so, Rebbe, I don't know, he tried to placate you. The Rebbe said, as he gives him a ruble, 1 ruble. And at this point, the Rebbe says to him, he says to the Rebbe, "Rebbe, I don't understand. I don't know what he told you, but he's not, he was exaggerating things. It's not truth. It's not reality. I told you the truth. Why'd you give me one?" And the Rebbe tells him, "Look, there are 2 Odessas. There's Odessa up above, the way it looks above, and there's Odessa in the below. What your friend described to me is one Odessa. What you described to me, I know Odessa very well. I was simply I wanted to find out which Odessa do you live in. Your friend apparently lives in Odessa up above. You apparently live in Odessa in the below. What does that mean? Each and every one of us has our viewpoint of life, and that viewpoint, that perception, becomes reality. It's the intonation, it's what makes reality reality. And it might not be the actual reality, it might be your factual reality, because that's the way you've trained yourself or been trained to view your external circumstance. So if one looks at the world from one's externality, then they will notice the externality of the world. If one learns to probe deep and look, truly look, with their mind's eye, with their soul eye, from God's perspective, then they'll see the internal aspect of everything. We don't have to be so esoteric about it. Look at this world. Right now, if I look over here, this is a plate, here's a cup, here's a phone. What's that? You're going to tell me what? This is a rocket ship? Come on. This is you see what you see. You take a microscope and you look just a little deeper than your eye can see. Notice there's no plate. It's a bunch of organisms, living, moving. And you take even a deeper like a quantum microscope, there's no plate at all. There's nothing. It's just energy. The world is telling you this at this point. How do you view your world begins with which eyes do you perceive? Are you using sight or are you using vision? What Ben Zoma is teaching us over here is while the world is convinced that having money makes you rich. Look, I'm like Scrooge McDuck. You know, you ever have his DuckTales, like he was like, remember that? Like he's like swimming in his gold. I'm like Scrooge McDuck. I have like billions of gold coins. Right? Okay, so you have a lot of money. Does that make you rich? Well, according to the world, yeah. How much the previous Rabbi wrote in his diary that he was so shocked when he came to America and heard the famous American phrase, "How much is he worth?" Like in money. Like this person's worth. In other words, you're attaching a dollar sign as a worth to a human being.
What is your net worth?
That's even the word. Obviously, we understand what that means, but the very usage of such words in such a manner in itself is perverse. How do you use these two words in the same phrase, the same sentence? The worth of the person is money. The Gemara says Rabbi Yehuda would give, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, the prince, the one who compiled the Mishnah, would give deference to the rich. While in the yeshivot, in the academies of back then, there were benches and benches and benches, no microphones. Obviously, you're talking about 2,000 years ago. There's no benches, and there's no microphones, so all the hundreds or thousands of students who come, they would just sit in benches, and the more astute the student, the closer he would be to the teacher. In other words, the more one could understand, the more he would be, because he would be primed to give it over. And if you didn't, so okay, come enjoy whatever you hear, you hear. But when a wealthy person would walk in, somebody who could contribute, when he would walk in, front seat. Is that a bias? You see many times the Rebbe, when truly wealthy people would come, the Rebbe would give them politician. No, because it's not the money. It's the fact that if you were given money, it means your soul has incredible power to be able to utilize it. Because money could corrupt very quickly. Very quickly. The Rebbe said that being rich is harder than being poor. The trials of being rich are much harder than the trials of being poor. It's very easy to lose yourself when you have money. Being poor is not easy at all. But as we spoke about in yesterday's class, Alona asked this question. It says when a person goes through hardships, it humbles them enough to keep the main thing to be the main thing. But when everything's easy, like Rabbi Kazin once said, I asked him, Rabbi Kazin, which was easier for you, America or Russia? I thought I would know the answer very quickly, because in Russia, his mother died in jail watching her son being beaten to extract information. His father-in-law Mrs. Kazin's father was arrested and disappeared, and If later on they found out he was shot and thrown into a ditch. Everybody was like, there's Siberia was always looming, and the Troika, the three-man judge, jury, and executioner that could make anybody disappear in a split minute without any legal proceedings whatsoever, to the point that 90 million people were murdered. And there's no food, and there's and school and Shabbos, and everything had to be. You would think that here, coming to America in 1954 and literally setting up an empire, where he has over 1,000 grandchildren who are practicing rabbis and rebbitzins and grandchildren. I'm talking about family all around the world, from China to South America, like everywhere. You would think that without missing a beat, of course, he says, of course, Russia was better, easier. Why? Because in Russia we were being chased and hunted, but we knew who we were. Here in America, nobody's chasing, but no one knows who they are. They think that they're here to watch YouTube. My brother Shmulik, when he was a student, he was learning Yerushalayim, and Rabbi Din Steinsaltz, the great Rabbi Din Steinsaltz, passed away. It's just about 4 years ago, something like that. He translated the entire Talmud. He was a mind of, such a sharp. Translation of the entire Talmud. Literally, it was the first ones that in modern day that did something like that. And not just translated, elucidated it. And then the Chumash, but he was a very sharp Jew. So my brother asks him, tell me, what's the difference between American Jews and Israeli Jews? And without missing a beat, he says, are you kidding me? American Jews, you guys worship Roger Rabbit. Roger Rabbit?
You know Roger Rabbit?
Who framed Roger Rabbit?
It's an animation.
Bob Hoskins?
What's her name? Jessica? His wife?
It was a movie in 1989.
Yeah. Jessica Rabbit.
Paul Abdul did the soundtrack.
Yeah.
With Roger Rabbit. Mm-hmm. But America was obsessed with this little cartoon for a minute. So he's like, are you kidding me? You guys worship Roger Rabbit. In other words, that's it. That's what's the next show? This is a TikTok. Come on. So in other words, when you talk about being rich, sometimes that richness brings, not sometimes, it will very quickly and very easily bring complacency. And then you forget what life is about. So for that reason, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi would give deference to the wealthy, because if you're truly wealthy, if you have money, it means you have the soul power to withstand that. It means, in other words, you have a very lofty soul, because not everybody's given wealth. As the Tzemach Tzedek, the third Lubavitch Rebbe once explained, and a Rebbe explained in a monumental Verbringing in Purim 1956, 1955. Money is like clothing. It has to fit the person. The best clothing, the best material still has to fit the person. If it doesn't, if it's too tight, or if it's too wide, too big, having the best material, but it's longer than your sleeve, than your hand, or longer than your feet, it's just going to make you stumble. Too short, it's constricting. You can't move. It has to be exact. So is money. Money has to fit the person. A lot of people want money, but if they had that money, as we see from studies, that what happens when people win the lotto, they end up becoming miserable, broke, addicted, and to give something that a person doesn't know how to handle, it's like giving a child all this candy, but that doesn't mean it's good for you.
So a person that's given money, they're given financial status, they are the type of person that's able to handle it.
Yeah, that's indicative of that. Right? It doesn't take away your choice.
Right.
But you need to know that.
But the opportunity is there.
The opportunity is definitely there.
And then it's a matter of how you utilize that opportunity.
If you understand that it's a God-given opportunity. And it's not your money. It's not your own strength that did this. Because a person could work all they want and still not make money. Because Hashem itashir. It's the blessing of Hashem that makes one rich. And when you understand that all you are is God's investor in this world. That's what you are. And God knows how much to give you based on what you've done last year. How much you invested for Him. You're God's wealth manager in this world. You're distributing it out to where it needs to go. It's not yours. The fact that you get to enjoy, Baruch Hashem, the part that you need.
So how much you give corresponds directly to how much you'll make.
How much God will give.
How much
Yeah.
God will give.
Yeah. Once before Yom Kippurim, the Rabbi says, whoever wants to whatever money you want to make this year, write a letter to and put it by the ohel or give it in to the Rabbi. How much of a maser, of a tenth, are you giving this year? In other words, you want to make $1 million, commit yourself right on to $1 million, or whatever, 100 million, whatever it is. Whatever you want to make, you commit, and you're going to hold by it. But when you commit down here, you're making a vessel for Lamaila. But you have to be serious. And not like, I'm going to throw it, let's see what happens. You got to commit to it.
I think you have to get 10% of that.
Of your earnings, yeah. Of your profits, you must give. Huh?
Anything of your choice?
No.
What?
Has to be specifically to Jewish causes that promote Jewish values, learning, and Jewish life, and so on and so forth. Saving the whales in Burma.
No, I wouldn't do that.
Is not a...
Of course Jewish, but I'm just saying what in particular, what kind of thing?
It depends. Each person has their thing, but generally speaking, and like institutions that promote Judaism, teaching, learning, growth, that help families, that help, In other words, right here, it's perfect. Right here. Right here is perfect. Bring us your money, we'll turn it to, we're like silkworms. You give us whatever and we'll churn out spirituality. That's what the Rabbi says. For a Jew, the Gashmius is turned to Ruchnius. The physical turns to spirituality. You take the physical in order to make spiritual. So now you would think that having wealth is something external. So I have a lot of money. It doesn't mean anything. Just because you have money doesn't make you rich. Just because you know a lot of things and you've accumulated a lot of knowledge because you've learned from the best of the best doesn't make you wise. But just because everybody looks up at you doesn't make you honorable. And just because you know how to strategize and you know how to be on point and you're this, it doesn't make you strong. Maybe on the conventional external level, yeah, it does. Yeah, of course, you can't deny it, that's fact. But as we said many times, all facts are true, but don't necessarily represent the truth. Maybe factually a person has a lot of money. Actually, they're not rich at all. And we have to really probe into that. So what does that mean? Because we also have to bring this down to practice. Okay, so let's begin to elucidate this. Number one, Ezeu Chacham, who is wise? Ben Zoma says, who is wise? Halomed Mikol Adam, someone who learns from every person. The first and foremost, Ben Zoma is, as the Rebbe explains, in his answer, someone who learns from everyone is pointing a direction to the wording itself, halomed mikol adam. It's very interesting because you would think, if you really analyze the wording, l'chu'ura, seemingly, who is wise? Someone who's accumulated a lot of knowledge, even from the wisest of people. But listen to what Ben Zoma is answering. Halomed, someone who is learning, who learns from everyone. Where's the emphasis? He is constantly learning. It's not what he received. It's not what he acquired. It is someone who's learning now. Halomed. Right now, he is learning from everyone. In other words, it's not an external trait. It's an internal definition of life. How does one perceive life? He looks everywhere, and he's from everything that happens, everyone that he interacts with. What could I learn? What is God showing me? Everything, every moment he is learning something. And over here, every being that this is God's world, and every iota of this world is God. Baruch Shamar V'Hayam, it's God speaking. So from everything you could, not everyone is truth, but everyone has truth in them because they're God. So there's what to learn from them. From every interaction, from every situation. For example, how did Newton come up with gravity? The story goes that he was sitting under a tree and an apple fell. He says, well, what makes the apple fall? And that makes him question. In other words, where somebody says, oh, it hurt me, and that's it. This is painful. That's it. The end of the story. The end. This was painful. I don't like it. I'm never sitting here again. Somebody who's wise says, hold on a second. This did happen. Yeah, of course. And yeah, it hurt. But that's not the end of the story. That's only the beginning of the probe. To a wise person who looks from the internal perspective, forget about what I knew until now. The world already had assumptions. The world already had these theories, understanding of all how the world is already. What could he possibly add to the picture? Already in the 16th century? Or the 17th century? What could he already add? Well, from one incident, the entire viewpoint of everything we know about the world changes. It's an internal perspective that can never be quenched. Because what's the difference? If it's externally based, then the wisdom could be forgotten. Money could be lost. And what happens if you had a great professor who learned so much and then one day he forgot it? Is he no longer wise? Well, from the world's perspective, no, he's not. He was and now he's not. But from an internal perspective, that point, whatever drove him, he's still driving him. It's different. It's different. But nevertheless, it's there.
So, just a quick question. Is it that, so every interaction you have, every conversation, everything comes from Hashem. If it comes from Hashem, then you're meant to learn from everything. And it's a matter of...
From everyone.
And everyone, right? Mm-hmm. So it's a matter of interpretation as to whether it's... Some things are true, some things are not, and it's up to you to interpret...
What's the truth in there?
In what you're experiencing, when you're talking to, who you're seeing with, and so forth.
Right. So not too long ago, there was the BLM movement. Right? The Me Too movement, right? And we spoke about this before. This is the way the world is doing its social justice. Obviously, it was very perverse. But was the base concept perverse? Not at all. The base concept was very on point. BLM means you can't judge a person based on external features. You just can't. You can't create a justice system based on externalities because it's not just anymore. It's bias. The Me Too movement, as perverse as it was, and it's not that, God forbid, women being raped or molested by their superiors, it's the very fact that these women were complicit. A lot of these women were complicit at the time, growing in their field, utilizing whatever, and then later on to have a turnaround. It's not justifiable at all. But nevertheless, but the base point is 100% true. Can't use your leverage to molest someone else, to hurt someone else. And so what were they asking? Now, if a person looks at it from a wisdom perspective, then they were asking for the 7 mitzvahs of Bnei Noach, which was incidentally something that we need to give them. Have a just course system is one of the 7 mitzvot. Not raping is another. Human dignity. Having God in your life. So they were asking now, if you look at externally, there's just a bunch of rioters and looters and everything. When the hippie movement began, with 3 Jews, they had 3 Jews, two in New York, 1 in California, began the entire hippie movement. And what there were the outcasts, the long hairs, this and that. How did the Rabbi? The Rabbi spoke about this many times. They're not. They are tired of the plastic American dream that was force-fed down their throats as being life. A nice suburban house, 2 cars and a half a dog and a 2.5 children, whatever that means. A trip to this and that. That's your life. And the rest is just work to support that. So they were just basically rebelling against that because they're looking for truth. So the Rebbe said looking for truth. The Rebbe started sending shluchim to campuses to give truth because that's what they were longing for. And it worked. How many thousands of Jews made tshuva because of that? They came back and became shluchim themselves. You could look at the world from externality and then just say, the apple hit me, this hurts, I'm never going to come to this tree again. Or this already happened to me, or you already said this to me, and that's it. True wisdom teaches us. Ben Zoma is teaching us that true wisdom is an internal state of perception, which is constant. So no matter what you have, how much you know until now, it doesn't matter. What I learned here, and you spoke to me today? Let me think about this. God will speak to that. What I learned from you? We know the very famous Hayom Yom. It was just about a month and a half ago. Zu Shavadipol, he said we could learn 7 traits from a thief, how to serve God. And when you look at that Hayom Yom, you would think that you're talking about a tzaddik if you didn't know he's talking about a thief. A thief is very diligent. He is very persistent. He's very quiet and humble about what he does. He doesn't brag. Like, in other words, 7 traits that you could learn from. You would think, what could you learn from a thief? Everybody said, what not to do. No. What to do? How to serve God. Because again, while everyone might not be truthful, everybody has a truth to them. Because they're created by God. That if they're created by God and being brought into the reality right now, every instant means that God is speaking through them. And a truly wise person who is viewing the world from their inner self, from their nefesh elokis, from their godly soul, will connect to that godly signal everywhere. And always see opportunities here and this, because it's all God. Doesn't matter how it came, conventional, it doesn't matter. That's why, according to this, a truly wise person from the mission, from Ben Zoma's perspective, is not someone who necessarily sits in study halls and is constantly listening to lectures. That definitely endows you with wisdom, but that doesn't make you wise. Being wise is someone who is in touch with the internal perspective and then sees it everywhere, in everyone, at all times. To the point that it's going to motivate them. Here there's an opportunity to do this, here's going to be an opportunity here. Over here we could do this, and over here like this. And that's why he says, who is learning from every person. Not just the wise people. Not just the superiors. Even in the mailroom, he's learning from the other mail clerks. And from the custodians. And from this, because everybody has a share in this world. Everybody's here from God, and there's what to learn from everyone. You know, when it comes to, for example, in parenting, there was conventional parenting back in the day, and then Baruch Hashem, how this wisdom is trickling down more and more into this world. But we know in previous generation, if the child would imagine you have a nice porcelain thing, and the child is trying to pour, and he drops it, it breaks, and there's water everywhere in front of the guests, what would the parent do?
You're asking what parent or Russian parent?
Oh, let me tell you, it was American parents, it was Israeli parents, it was Russian parents, it was Persian parents. They're very simple. It was you'll be screamed at, you'll be talked down to, and so on and so forth. You could be beaten very easily, right? What about in friends, spouses? Doesn't do what I like, I don't want to deal with it. Here, what do we learn? There's a new thing called a learning opportunity. And it's true. That's what wisdom teaches us. This is what he's teaching. A child makes a mistake, instead of externally, yeah, he made a mistake. And maybe he should have been more careful. And maybe you already spoke to him about this. Now, you could use that as an opportunity to berate the person, further break him down, further break his confidence, further make him feel like he or she is nothing, further push him away. He's learning. You're teaching. What are you teaching? Because he's learning. It's a learning opportunity. Or you say, all right, here's what happened. Fine. What do we have to do now? What needs to be done right now? Now that we made this mistake. Now that this fell. And what do we learn about it next time? So right now we have to clean up. What do we have to learn for next time? Be more careful, more mindful, more this and that. But in other words, it's a learning opportunity. One way or another, you're learning something. You're teaching something. Just be aware of that. Every interaction that you have, especially with your inner circle of people who are paying attention, is a learning moment. You're learning, they're learning. What are you learning? What are you teaching? This is what Ben Zoma is teaching us about wisdom. It's not external base. It's utilizing every externality from a holistic internal viewpoint. So how does this situation, how do I learn to serve God from this? Or how do I learn to be better over here? But it's everything is learning. I mean, you can learn from, what did we say the other day? Mendel said that the clock, a broken clock, and what did we say? And Mendel said that a broken clock there's two clock stories. Once Mendel was sitting in a Chabad house, and they had the old analog clocks, but over there the clock for every minute, it would be like a page turned to the next. It would just keep on revolving for the hours and for the minute. And Mendel, in the middle of Farbrengen, looked at that clock and says, that's a Chassidic clock. Why? Because every moment is a new opportunity. Another person would say, that's a cool clock. Regarding another, Mendel once said that he saw a broken clock. Says this broken clock is like a person, like a poor communicator, a poor, as we spoke about, empathy and so on and so forth. This clock might be right twice every day, consistently, but he's going to miss everything in between those 2 times. Everything else is going to be a void. While a fixed clock is like a good communicator, someone who lives with the moment. Every moment is a new reality. And you adjust yourself to what's happening now, not what happened a minute ago. See how deep this could be. You see how deep and phenomenal this could be. This is from everything you see, everything you hear, there's what to learn. Is God speaking to you? We'll continue this next time.